Here's some botched up extra bits. Fries on the side.
But this is it, right? So the Raw after St. Valentine's Day Massacre, this is the real meat, potatoes, and gravy of the Ministry of Darkness. This is where it
Christ, I hope
starts.
I watched it.
Some lightning hits the stage, and then we get the song, the Undertaker song that we all know and love now, that we all associate with him, plays at the end of this segment.
What
I
didn't notice that. Was that the first instance?
I think that's
cool.
the very first time that like the Undertaker song we all love was ever played. So that's pretty cool.
I'm not even sure I should be mentioning this live on air, to be honest, because it's pretty sad. But I've recently started a sort of cocaine rock playlist, like Queens of the Stone Age and Jack White and Black Keys, to get me going in the morning. And the Ministry of Darkness is like chugging electric guitar, Taker talking in tongues theme tune has ended up
that's
on
your playlist, yeah?
So by about 9:30 in the morning, I'm listening to that song every day. Well, I was going to say The Big Show was a face, but apparently even in 1999, nobody had any idea.
Don't start, because we're going to get to that on the second part. Fucking flip-flops on his first month of the company. Started You Mean to Go On show, I guess.
Undertaker's Bone Street crew in real life. So Undertaker had a little gang backstage, which was sort of the anti-clique where all the hard men came from. And all of the group have BSK tatted on them. It's on Taker's stomach. I think it's somewhere on Mideon's arm. And they hung around heavy, like they drank heavily. There's a story about Undertaker. Do you know the band Cypress Hill?
Yeah.
Insane in the Membrane?
Yeah.
So Undertaker was going sober for a little while, and he met Cypress Hill at a airport, and they said, "Hey, let's go drinking." And Taker's like, "Nah, I'm taking it easy." And Cypress Hill said something along the lines of, "Didn't realize you're a pussy." And Taker looked at them, and that was that. And he just says, like, maybe 10 hours later, they were all asleep in this hazy, smoke-filled room, apart from Taker and X-Pac, who was like babbling, and Taker just picked him up and picked X-Pac up and put him on his shoulder and walked out of the room with like 5 dead Cypress Hill guys. But anyway, what I'm saying is that group was built for heavy drinking, and they played dominoes a lot, which is the Bone Street crew. That's what that happened. And it seems like a lot of Taker's mates, specifically Dennis Knight, were basically given a role in this ministry, so while Taker had something to do to give his friends a little bit of a rub, which is where the Mideon thing comes from.
Okay. And this is when it gets batshit crazy. They show a recap of a house show where Austin collapses. He suffered a concussion from that shot with a shovel that Taker gave him the week before. So Austin isn't at the show. He's at hospital. And we keep seeing him in vignettes all through Raw. And then Undertaker comes in with Paul Bearer and kidnaps him from hospital. They put him into a hearse, and they decide they're going to bury Austin alive. I don't sure why Undertaker hates him this much at this point that you'd want to bury him.
That's pretty standard Taker shit, isn't it? Like he tried to bury Mankind, I think, the year before, and then he's burying Austin in this segment, and then the ether comes out from Paul Bearer's pocket, and it's all very normal Taker stuff. I didn't even bat an eyelid at it.
Fair enough.
You know, but then it gets weird.
Yeah, so Paul Bearer decides burying him alive isn't bad enough. We got to do something.
I agree.
We got to do something else. So Taker decides to throw him back into the hearse, and they go to a funeral home. And then they decide they're going to embalm him while he's still alive. Heat, March 14th. Undertaker is announced as being in the film Poltergeist: The Legacy.
What?
Yeah, which I think kind of undermines the fact that he just got arrested 5 days ago.
Wait, what? Undertaker turned up in Poltergeist 4?
Yeah, I think they just announced
Is that
that on Heat.
true?
Well,
That's amazing.
that's what they said on Heat.
Let me think now. I've seen Poltergeist 1, Poltergeist 2 was Poltergeist 2, and then Poltergeist 3 was awful. Oh, Poltergeist The Legacy is apparently
It's a
a
TV show.
television show.
It's a TV show, so he must have made a cameo. I mean, it's got 88 episodes, so I'm not going to find out which one.
I wonder if he made any sacrifices on set.
I wonder if there's crucifix turned up.
I wouldn't hire a guy with that sort of psychological imbalance, especially when people are calling him Mark and saying he's gone too far with his gimmick.
Yeah, but I just thought it was crazy that they said that when they hadn't said anything about him getting out of prison or what was up with the prison. Instead, they were just like, "Yeah, this guy's in a film." But they didn't even say it was a TV show. I assumed it was a movie.
Well, thank you very much for that piece of trivia. I like that.
But on this Raw, it's Kane versus Mankind. Vince comes out on commentary again, and this is where he announces the Hell in a Cell match: Kane versus Botching.
Right, yeah.
So he comes on the commentary booth, and Michael Cole and King are saying, "What's with the teddy bear? What's going on?" And he's like, I'll tell you about that in a second. But first, I just came out here to say Taker and Bossman are having a Hell in a Cell match at WrestleMania. But let's talk about the teddy bear. Like, that's how much it was just thrown out there.
Yeah, and this is like 2-3 weeks removed, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's like 2 weeks to go.
Which is just crazy to me.
We pull back from a monitor, and Austin and Kane are laughing backstage that they've just sent Taker to the asylum.
Or as Jerry Lawler calls it throughout this whole thing, the funny farm.
Yeah, I'm being very careful not to use the language they use in the 90s.
Well, I'm just directly quoting them. The amount of times I heard the funny farm in 6 to 8 months.
They call it the loony bin. They call it something else as well. Very derogatory terms, which I guess in the 90s were just fine to say.
King literally at one point went from a sentence about throwing them in the funny farm to shouting puppies and advertising an evening gown match. And I knew I was in like peak 1999
different
here.
era, man. Anyway, so the next week on Raw, nothing is said about Undertaker going to an asylum.
Nothing is followed up quite a lot throughout these coming months.
Some druids run out. They're all beating down Austin. They get Austin onto the crucifix, and then the crucifix is raised up into the air with Stone Cold on it, which is a very impressive visual.
Very, very cool. The Taker music playing at the same time as the druids hymning, Austin hanging above, Taker speaking on over the top of all of this stuff happening, while he's like, his eyes are up in his head and he's got his hands up. It was a really amazing image, and I can see why that's been preserved as a moment in history that they still talk about to this day.
I mean, I got goosebumps when it happened, watching it. I was like, that's cool, that's badass. And Austin was safe because he's Austin. He was his face was so angry, and you couldn't hear him, but you could see that he was saying all the curse words he knew.
It'd be interesting to actually fully get into the ministry with you in a minute, because I feel like there was a few key missteps. Maybe they weren't even missteps. It was just there's so much stuff going on that if it had been handled differently or been handled with more importance, we could have seen so many more of these moments.
Yeah, see, I feel at this point in history, there was no plan for the ministry to be this huge stable. I feel like it was just Taker's gone down this devil route and he's speaking in tongues, and someone backstage would be like, it'd be really cool if we do a crucifixion. And to put it over to be this massive thing, we got to put Steve Austin on it.
Also, just like a little bit edgier with the embalming stuff. Taker's the perfect character to really throw and push them into that attitude era where everything's close to the knuckle, which is why I think a lot of the ministry stuff is so hard to watch now. I feel like Taker was the bastion for a lot of the attitude stuff where they were trying to get away with anything they possibly could, because he's the most viable character to represent elements of violence, danger, and because he's a supernatural character. I don't know, dude. Like, I don't feel like anywhere else since the sort of 18th century France have a crowd shouted boring and then watched an execution. It's ridiculous.
Heat, March 14th. Undertaker is announced as being in the film Poltergeist: The Legacy.
What?
Yeah, which I think kind of undermines the fact that he just got arrested 5 days ago.
Wait, what? Undertaker turned up in Poltergeist 4?
Yeah, I think they just announced
Is
that
it
on
true?
Heat. Well,
That's amazing.
that's what they said on Heat.
Let me think now. I've seen Poltergeist 1, Poltergeist 2 was Poltergeist 2, and then Poltergeist 3 was awful. Oh, Poltergeist: The Legacy is apparently
It's a TV show.
a television show.
It's a TV show, so he must have made a cameo. I mean, it's got 88 episodes, so I'm not going to find out which one.
I wonder if he made any sacrifices on set.
I wonder if there's crucifix turned up.
I wouldn't hire a guy with that sort of psychological imbalance, especially when people are calling him Mark and saying he's gone too far with his gimmick.
Yeah. But I just thought it was crazy that they said that when they hadn't said anything about him getting out of prison or what was up with the prison. Instead, they were just like, "Yeah, this guy's in a film." Well, they didn't even say it was a TV show. I assumed it was a movie.
Well, thank you very much for that piece of trivia. I like that. So this is a taste of what we have to come.
And if you like, Kane has now just turned babyface, which is kind of important for when we get deep into this story in '99.
Really weird to think about now because Kane was my favorite when I was a child, and this probably explains why. He was a good guy. He was teaming with X-Pac 6 months later.
Yeah, he becomes a team of X-Pac, and you want to root for him every week because Vince and Shane bully him, and it's crazy that he's meant to be this big monster that can shoot fireballs, and he's being beaten up by people half his size.
Well, I was going to say the Big Show was a face, but apparently even in 1999, nobody had any idea.
Don't start, because we're going to get to that on the second part. He fucking flip-flops on his first month of the company. Start as you mean to go on show, I guess.
I don't feel like in the first one Kane did a flying bump out the ring. That's pretty crazy stuff.
Or maybe they just both felt that the first one sucked so much. This time they had to go that extra level with it.
Nobody's even paying attention because Vince is crying about a bear.
Yeah, so Vince has a teddy bear, and then after the match, Kane's boot gets caught on fire, and then nobody really helps him because everyone's concerned about what Vince is doing. He's kind of just rolling around. And then Undertaker sets the teddy bear on fire. Vince falls to his knees, crying and sobbing. I'm completely distracted because Michael Cole is just yelling, "What does this mean? What does this mean?" It's like, shut the fuck up, Michael. And so the teddy bear gets thrown up the ramp, and nobody puts that out either, so it's just left to burn. Then we have next week, Vince opens the show, and he is pissed off that he cried on national TV and that he promises to never do that again. That's the level of toxic masculinity we're living with.
That's very apparent, though. Just like him showing American football star Rob Gronkowski how to fall properly, and then doing gun points where as soon as he jumps down as a 76-year-old man, that man will never lose face publicly or privately. It's where the lines blur between the character and the person.
Here's my problem with it. Boss Man is murdered, right? Well, he's
Yeah.
murdered. He's just been hung, and then he turns up on TV 2 weeks later.
Not even on TV 2 weeks later. He's on Heat.
Yeah, even when Undertaker was buried, it still took 6 weeks for him to turn up again.
Oh, sorry, dude. He's not on TV. He's what? When was WrestleMania
This
15?
one, I didn't write the date down. It would have been the 28th of March.
If WrestleMania 14 is 20th March, then he's on Heat on the 4th of April.
Yeah, so 2 weeks. So
Like, share, and subscribe to keep it botched up, brother.